Okay.
So can you start off by telling me your name, how you spell it, and your title?
Sure. I'm Major Chuck McNeal. It's my last name is McNeal, and I'm the major over the Gaming Enforcement Division for the State Police.
Perfect. So just start off by telling me how did that meeting go today? Were you in that meeting?
Which are you talking about the Gaming Control Board meeting?
Mm-hmm.
That was just a typical meeting that we have once a month. So it was just a standard meeting that we have. It wasn't specifically just for sports betting. There was just a general business that's covered on a month-to-month basis before the board.
Something that I'm particularly interested in is the licensing process. What does that look like?
Well, just so you, first off, it's not been finalized, the sports betting yet. The governor hasn't signed, I think, two of the three bills that have to be signed. One of them is the one that does with the regulatory aspect for us. But based upon the way the law is currently written and the governor signs it, which we anticipate, I've not heard anything otherwise. It's going to be, there's 20 licenses. Well, first off, let me say this. There's two aspects of this that I want to point out. There's the side that state police is going to regulate, and there's the side that the lottery is going to regulate. Okay, so that's the two different distinctions right there, first off, because we're two different entities governed differently. State police is going to be doing what we call the 20 river boats, the 15 river boats, the 4 racetracks, and the land-based casino. That's what we're going to be working on in state police's side with the Gaming Control Board and Attorney General's office. So that's kind of what I'm going to be focusing on, okay? Okay, sure. And so what that's going to be is those entities will have the ability to apply for a license, for a sports betting license. There's a date that's been specified in the law, which they have to apply by. They will apply with us with the application process. We'll look at the application process and then assess going from there. The one thing that's different in this is the legislature passed something that allows them to do, typically what would not happen first is there has to be rules and regulations. We have the laws that are passed, and then there's the rules and regulations. And typically what happened is you have to go through the rulemaking process, which can take up to about 6 months. But the legislature put in the bill that this can be handled under emergency rules. So we first have to do, the rules have to be written and approved preliminary by the Gaming Control Board, meaning that we can then have them published in the Louisiana Register. And my understanding and our understanding so far is, and this could be incorrect, but so far the way we understand it is once the rules have been published in the Louisiana Register, then at that time, we at State Police can then start accepting the applications for the sports betting process. And so that's when we would start it. Whereas daily fantasy was something totally different. I won't go into that unless you want me to, but that's something was totally different how we're handling it. It's two different ways. So it's unique in that sense. And at that point, then we'll be able to start taking applications. Once we receive someone's application and we deem it to be complete and full, meaning everything's there that we need, then our understanding is then we'll be able to start some process where they can start offering sports betting.
So the fantasy applications that started, this is going to be separate than this.
Correct. It's two different laws and two different ways that it's being handled. It's totally two different things. Even though people think it's the same thing, it's totally two different things. And so we only have 2 entities that have applied for daily fantasy sports licensing so far, and neither one of those have been approved yet. And they were able to apply back in February because the rules had been completed at that time. And so they started that process, and we've been working on that process with daily fantasy sports itself.
So now we're working on sports betting, which would be potentially allowed in casinos, the racetracks, etc.
That's correct. The racetracks, the riverboats, and the land-based will then be able to offer sports betting both on premises and mobile. But they will only be able to offer those in the parishes, the 55 parishes that approved it, and not in those parishes that voted it out back in the election.
So at this point, there isn't a set timeline on when people can start putting in those applications. Do you have any idea when people can actually start placing bets?
No, ma'am, I don't. That's the rough part for us right now is We just got out of the legislative process, as you know, and we're now working on writing the rules based upon the laws that were passed, because we had to make sure we had already started with the Attorney General's office and already started writing something. So it's not like we haven't started, but now we're having to go back and review, okay, the law says this, how do we say that? So what's going to happen is once we get to the point where we're able to present that to the board, that will not be until a board meeting like we had today. So that would not occur until another approved board meeting. Now there's one next month. I'm not saying it's happening next month. It probably won't happen next month. But once that date board meeting occurs, then we will be able to, kind of give a better date in the future of when we think it's gonna start. I think football season sometimes is appropriate, but not necessarily the beginning of football season, and I'm not saying at the end either. It's just a hard date to put down, because this is so new for all of us and how we're doing this. It's not that it's the sports betting part, but the process by which we're going about.
I think I read in the legislature that if the casinos and the racetracks, like the 20 licenses, aren't taken up by them, then other entities can start applying for those applications. Is that right?
Yes, there are 20 licenses that were issued or authorized by the legislature on the casinos. If one of those entities or a number of those entities decide not to apply for that, then there is a process by which the law has been spelled out that other, I wouldn't say entities, because it's going to, companies or something like can then put in for the process. And the way I understand it, and I'm not certain on this, but like, let's say if there's only, I'm gonna use hypotheticals here. If there's 3 licenses that are not used and 3 companies applied, then I think then they may be eligible for them. I'm not sure if that point they still have to go for a bid. I do know that if there's more than 3, that there has to be a bid process, but I'm not too certain at this time what's going to happen if there's only 3 licenses and only 3 entities were applied. That's still, I think we're still working on that to understand that complexity of that situation.
So in simple terms, could you lay out what still needs to be done?
Sure. That's right now, currently the rules have to be written, and that's what we're working on right now. Once we get those rules, once the Attorney General's office, the board, and ourselves feel like we've got something that is workable, then we'll bring that to the board. The board, the 9 members will then look at that, review it, and if they agree with that, then the rules will be then published. Once the rules are published for comment, and that starts a process of where it takes 6 months for that process to be finished, but that's not going to be necessary to start sports betting. Let me say it that way. That process still will be occurring, but we're not having to wait to the end like we did with DFS. Once that process starts, then our understanding is, please understand, it's our understanding, it could change, but the way we understand it is at that point, we'll be able to accept applications. The entities will apply with the required applications, meaning the license, the sports betting provider, the sports betting platform, all those things that are spelled out in the law will then apply to us. We'll review those applications, and once we determine that we have everything we need to start our background, so it's a complete application we call, like we have everything we need, then I believe we go before the board and request, I think it's a temporary authorization. The board would then authorize temporarily a casino and its sports book provider that they would then be able to start sports betting. They've met the basic requirements. They will then be issued a date that they can start by the board. We're still doing our background and everything else during this whole process. Once we complete our background application, then we'll go back to the board and say, Company X has done everything, we have it, and we are authorizing them now for their 5-year license. And they will be then able to remove the temporary and then operate in a normal capacity without a temporary status per se. That's kind of how I think it's going to work so far, but that's what we think is going to happen. And please understand, that's how we think it is. And as with everything, things could change, but as we understand, that's what's going to happen.
So then the other thing that I wanted clarification on was, I'm trying to remember the name of it, sports book, or like is it supposed to be like a separate wing of the casino or like a certain area? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. The law specifies each place has to have a sports book. All 20 have to have a sports book location. So there's going to be some location in the casino that is designated an area for sports booking and where sports booking can occur. You know, it could be anything where there's all kind of, we're still working on what it's going to look like, but it's an area where you would go and be able to place sports wagers at. Could it be could it be something they convert to a restaurant, or an area they convert to a restaurant, or an area that's just sitting down that's a bar? There is no specific way it's got to look at this time. It's got to be a sports bar or a sports wagering room, and that's really wide open for interpretation this time, because I've been to Vegas a couple of times, and some places are a restaurant, and some places are a place you just simply sit down and watch TV, and you can place bets at a window. So I think there's going to be, it's going to be determined later what exactly that is, but that's kind of what we're looking at. And it's going to have to be an area where, no one under 21 can go. And just like it is controlled as gaming is in any other facility that they have, it's going to have the same requirements from us at State Police and the Attorney General's office and the Gaming Control Board.
Is there anything else that you want to add or that you think is important?
No, ma'am, I think you pretty much covered with the questions. I think, the biggest thing just for you to know, and anybody else, is there's a difference between daily fantasy sports and the sports wagering. It's two different separate things, and the processes are somewhat different, but the overall on our side are going to be the same on how we handle certain things. So,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you also for that clarification between the two, because I also thought they were the same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for that.
No problem. Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Thank you, and have a nice day. Nice talking to you. Bye-bye.